This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, investors stormed into riskier assets this week, encouraged by positive COVID-19 vaccine updates. That, of course, led to heavy buying of shares in hard-hit sectors such as banks, travel and leisure, and, of course, the oil and gas sector. Now, analysts estimate that inflows into global stocks in the last 2 weeks soared to $71.4 billion, the biggest ever. The flows were led by U.S. and emerging market stocks. MSCI's index of emerging market equities was up 0.4% on the day. In South Africa, trading was cautious as local focus shifted to the ratings agency decisions. Of course, Moody's Investor Service and S&P Global Ratings are both scheduled to publish their latest reviews of South Africa, which could see it downgraded further into junk status. Now, also coming up on the show today, Pfizer to apply for emergency use authorization as hopes rise for availability of coronavirus vaccines. And governments in Africa register a decline in performance for the first time since 2010. And the Kenyan startup that's converting petrol and diesel engines to electric cars. Now, pharmaceutical firm Pfizer is asking U.S. regulators to allow emergency use of its COVID-19 vaccine. This could bring limited first shots as early as next month and eventually bring on an end to the pandemic. The move comes after the American pharmaceutical firm and its German partner, BioNTech, announced that its vaccine appears 95% effective after preventing mild to severe COVID-19 disease in a large ongoing study. Now, how much vaccine is available and when is a moving target? About 25 million doses of it may become available in December, 30 million in January and 35 million more in February and March. That, of course, is according to information presented to the National Academy of Medicine this week. Recipients will need 2 doses 3 weeks apart.
Emergency use authorization is an authority given to FDA by law that is intended to help respond to a public health emergency, basically. The emergency use authorization, or EUA, is a much different standard. It only requires that a product, quote, may be effective, and that FDA performs an assessment in the emergency of the available data and says, well, we think its known and potential benefits outweigh the known and potential risks.
Well, let's now shift focus. There has been a decline in African governance performance for the first time since 2010. That's according to the 2020 Ibrahim Index of African Governance that was, of course, launched earlier this week. Now, according to the report, the 2019 African average score for overall governance falls by negative 0.2 points below that of 2018, registering the first year-on-year score deterioration. Now, the decline has been triggered by worsening performance in 3 of the 4 categories that the index looks at. The index, of course, focuses on participation, rights and inclusion, security and rule of law, as well as human development. Now, progress achieved over the last decade has mainly been driven by improvements in economic opportunities and human development. This has been a result of improvements in infrastructure and health, as well as advances in sustainable environment. But the security situation has deteriorated, while civic rights and the democratic space has been eroded. Declines in this have been seen through the decade. Only about 8 nations have managed to improve in all 4 categories over the decade. That's Angola, Chad, Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Madagascar, Seychelles, Sudan, and Togo. Well, let's take that report apart further with the founder and chair of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, Mr. Mo Ibrahim himself. Great to have you on the show with us, Mr. Ibrahim. Now, of course, the report finds that overall governance in Africa improved from 2010, but of course that progress is now slowing down. So where exactly are African governments slacking? And give us your assessment of the reasons behind this slowdown.
Well, first, thank you for hosting me and your interest in the governance issue in Africa. There are a number of reasons, really. It's not just one reason. The governance started to improve really from around 2000. We have data between 2000 and 2020, although we report this time focusing on the last 10 years. So governance have been improving. I mean, today, 60% of Africans live in a better governed society. So that is not bad. But the unfortunate thing, in the last 5 years, we started to see stagnation. While government was improving year on year, really in a steady form, we started to wobble a little bit and stagnating. So the decline this year is just an extension of the trend you have seen over the last 4 years. You're asking about the reasons. I think there are a number of reasons. One reason is there's no doubt there is progress in the economic situation in Africa. The economy has been performing well over the last 20 years or so. We are moving forward, which is great. Infrastructure is better. Access to power, access to roads, etc., is improving, which is good news. We see also that in area like human development, education and health has been improving. Women's rights has been improving. And somehow maybe that was seen as a trade-off. Since we're improving in this area, we grew a little bit lax when to come to the areas of rule of law and human rights, etc., and participation. That's one reason. Second reason, I think, is around us, there have been decline in international governance in general. We see fraying in the global institutions and the global goods. That was really unfortunate. US appear to turn its back to some extent on the global order, which she generated actually after the Second World War. And that weakened the international resolve, which used to play a very important role on really holding people honest. If there is violation of human rights somewhere, the world will stand up and say, hey, please behave. Right. There have been weakness in this area, and that also did not help, unfortunately.
Quite right. I think it's interesting you point to the fact that there's been a decline in not just Africa, but internationally. But the report does point to a few nations that you say have improved in all categories. You mentioned countries such as Angola, Ethiopia, Cote d'Ivoire, Sudan. What are some of the developments in these nations that you think warrant these improvements?
You see, what happens is, I mean, Africa is a big continent. We have 54 countries, and each country has its own story. And I'm a little bit careful when we are pushed to introduce global statements about Africa. Africa is good, Africa is bad. I mean, because countries are different. They have different political situation, different stage of development, etc. And things happen in different times. So although what you mentioned, the numbers you cited, etc., or the conclusion is just that all African countries are going backward. There's also some bright spots, and some governments are really moving forward because political change. In Sudan, for example, we had a wonderful revolution which ended up the rule of the Islamicist, xenophobic government of General Bashir there. And we saw the young people coming out in the street and people looking to create a democratic society and fighting against corruption. And then, so things happen in different countries. In Cote d'Ivoire, which were one of the countries also improved, we see also that President Ouattara came after the civil war I mean, civil wars are terrible because wars destroy governance. If you have armed conflict somewhere, you cannot have development. You cannot have proper schooling or health care or infrastructure development. Conflicts are terrible. And that's what happened in Cote d'Ivoire, which used to be the engine of growth in Western Africa. And then the country came out of the civil war, and President Ouattara is an economist, a respectable man. He's an honest man, clean hands, was served before in an international organization, and he's an economist. Did really very well in the economic front to pull his country forward. So we can see that moving forward. In Angola, we see also change in the guards. And a new president coming with a strong anti-corruption message, and started to clean up and move the country forward. So things happen in different countries at different times, and that will always see some countries leaping forwards and see some countries, unfortunately, sliding backward.
Now, interesting, as you said, we are individually unique nations, but this year no country has escaped the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, it has created a new normal across board, and as a result, we have seen governments' priorities have had to change, they've had to shift. How do you see that impacting governance issues in Africa going forward? And suddenly, will it change how you assess governing on the continent?
Yeah, COVID is a big blow for us. And to some extent, so far, we have been spared the worst health outcomes of the disease. I mean, we are so lucky in that sense. And also, I must laud actually and appreciate the positive role played by many African leaders who really came forward and took measures, etc. Actually, many African leaders behaved in much better way than other global leaders elsewhere in responding to the pandemic. That's something we really should be proud of. But the economic outcome of the is going to be severe. It's going to be severe in Africa, and the economic growth, which has been moving forward all these years, for the last 25 years or so, is going to be reversed for the first time, and things are getting tough. And it's also tough for our people economically, because we see the many of the developed countries writing big checks, stay at home, lockdown, but we say, we're going to send you your paycheck. That is not happening in Africa, because African governments hasn't got the fiscal space. They haven't got the firepower in order to really to offer that largesse to its citizens. So our people will suffer more as a consequence of that, which is really unfortunate. We are also afraid that the heavy-handed approach by governments dealing with corona, which is justified. I mean, yes, unfortunately, sometimes you need to lock up the country because you need to stop this. But that gave a little, a bit too much power for governments, which sometimes leaders, having tested absolute power, would feel a little bit uneasy letting go. So I hope they don't develop a taste for this absolute global power they exercised during Corona, and hopefully things go back to normal again.
Well, we do have to leave it there, Mr. Ibrahim, but thank you so much for your insights. Of course, that's founder and chair of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, joining us there in Monaco. Well, let's move on now to South Africa. Lending rates in the country will remain at historical lows until next year. The South African Reserve Bank kept its key repo rate at 3.5%, unchanged at its monetary policy meeting this week. Now, the bank made 5 cuts to the rate in 2020 in order to help stimulate its economy. Heavily indebted South Africans welcomed the relief, but they were hoping for a little more before Christmas. Here's Sumitra Naidu reporting.
It was the Reserve Bank's last MPC meeting for 2020. Many were hoping there would be another cut in lending rates to help the economy and consumers that are struggling with the impacts of COVID-19. With inflation lower and the recent rand appreciation, some economists thought there was still room for further easing.
Inflation allows them to do that. But more importantly also, even on the import side, our currency has strengthened tremendously against the dollar. So really, there is so much space to have done something about it, to try and stimulate demand, particularly around this Christmas, because we need growth in this economy, and it will have really fueled some demand, which is so much needed.
But the Reserve Bank noted slight improvements in the economy, and even though the governor said it would take time to get back to pre-COVID levels, he suggested a strong rebound in the economy. The Reserve Bank adjusted its forecast for GDP. It now expects an 8% contraction in growth for this year instead of 8.2%.
Another interest rate cut would have been quite helpful. It would have boosted consumer confidence to some extent, but I'm quite doubtful whether it would have helped to reduce what is definitely a very sharp contraction. Cutting further is going to be very limited, and actually growth is going to have to come from implementing real growth stimulating measures.
Consumers were disappointed, but many are making use of the historically low rates. The Reserve Bank lowered the repo rate 5 times this year, reducing the interest rate for borrowers from 10% in January to 7%. Many are taking advantage of the lower rates while they can.
I've got a vehicle finance that I am paying, and then home loan finance that I am paying. If you add all of those together, you would find out sometimes it's about 3,500 that I am saving. I had credit cards that I managed to pay off with the money that was returning. Sometime in September, July, I took some of the money. I paid my son's school fee for next year.
The Reserve Bank has maintained that monetary policy is not the only tool that can be used to stimulate the economy. Structural reforms remain urgent. International rating agencies Moody's and S&P will deliver their verdict on the economy in the coming days. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And now let's take a look at some of our corporate headlines today. South Africa's Tiger Brands is cutting as many as 400 jobs as part of a cost-saving measure. It needs to adapt to a post-pandemic slump in its consumer demand. Now, Africa's largest listed food maker said the positions to be eliminated will be evenly spread between the Johannesburg head office and operating sites. It recently reported a 23% decline in earnings per share before one-time items for the year through September. And Kenya's electricity distributor, Kenya Power, has been rattled by a growing shift to more affordable and reliable solar power by heavy consuming industrialists. Power generation crossed a record 1 billion kilowatt hours in October, adding financial pressure on the distributor, which is already paying for huge volumes of idle electricity. And Vietnam has threatened to shut down Facebook in the country if it does not bow to government pressure to censor more local political content on its platform. Although Facebook complied with a government request in April, Vietnam asked the company again in August to step up its restrictions of critical posts. Now, Facebook has faced mounting pressure from governments over its content policies, including threats of new regulations and fines. And finally, Tesla has secured its own lithium mining rights in Nevada after dropping a plan to buy a company there. Producing lithium from clay has so far proven difficult and costly. No company has been able to produce commercial quantities using the practice, but a push into mining is at the center of Tesla's plan to cut battery costs and deliver on a promise to bring a $25,000 electric car to the market. That is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are taking a short break now, still to come. Mobile money comes to the rescue of aid agencies in Somalia. And trade between Tunisia and other African nations falls short of expectations.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Well, let's head to Somalia now. Aid agencies there have found new means of delivering aid to millions of vulnerable people as COVID-19 infections continue to rise in the country. Now, the agencies are using Somalia's intricate mobile money infrastructure to navigate that pandemic. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello has more from Mogadishu.
Ralia Mohammed is one of thousands of displaced persons who fled conflict in the Lower Shabelle region as government forces pushed through with an offensive against Al-Shabaab. At this sprawling settlement on the outskirts of Mogadishu, the mother of two is among thousands receiving support from Save the Children, a UK-based humanitarian aid organization. However, with the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, assistance has been limited. Aid agencies are now providing cash transfer via mobile in efforts to limit the spread of the virus.
I fled conflict with my children in Janale at this camp. I have received assistance and am now able to prepare 3 meals for my children since we moved here. I use the remaining for the education and upkeep.
Not far from the camp lives Sitei Mose, who fled from Shelembot in Lower Shabelle.
Before the coronavirus pandemic, we used to receive $40, but now we receive $70 via mobile. This has allowed us to plan our lives. My children can now eat and receive quality education.
Dair Gedi is the program manager at Save the Children and says the country's mobile money infrastructure has played a crucial role, allowing his team to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic.
This year we have reached 60,000 families through the mobile cash transfer after signing a partnership with Hormuz Telecom. They send the money to beneficiaries and we verify by calling each family to confirm the amount and delivery date and time.
World Bank estimates the transaction worth approximately $2.7 billion are carried out monthly. Aid agencies are now shifting towards the system in order to reach almost 3 million people displaced by years of conflict and climate-related disasters. The best part about mobile money transfer service system in Somalia is that its clients do not incur any transfer charges, a move that has allowed aid agencies and its beneficiaries to receive money directly to their phones at no extra cost.
Due to limited movement, we created a scenario-based approach. We used the database we have for displaced persons and those benefiting from our medical assistance. The approach allowed our staff to work from home so as to protect them from contracting coronavirus, but perform required tasks as we did before the pandemic.
Statistics indicate that the penetration rate of mobile money in displaced camps stands at 72%. Leading aid agencies now say they are moving to mobile cash transfers as a likely blueprint of overcoming the pandemic and other challenges facing aid delivery in the country. Abdul Aziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Now, trade between Tunisia and other African nations is falling short of expectations despite the opportunities offered by the continental market. That is according to authorities in Tunisia, who this week held a virtual event aimed at eliminating bottlenecks that have held back trade. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shaushi with the details.
This event is the first large-scale Tunisian-African virtual business meeting. Tunisian businesses operating in agri-food, health, higher education, construction materials, public works, ICT, mechanical and electrical engineering industries, and textile and clothing took part in the continental event. Prime Minister Hisham Meshishi deplored the volume of trade between Tunisia and other African countries, which he said was below expectation.
The diversification of our economic partners represents a consistent strategic orientation of our country's economic policy. This trend has been confirmed by the economic and social development goals for Tunisia. It is characterized by a wide openness of the national economy to its African space. Tunisia grants a special position to its African partners while seeking to establish a win-win partnership.
The Secretary General of COMESA encouraged the streamlining of decision-making processes in Africa. She also acknowledged the role of digital technologies in increasing responsiveness and planning during the pandemic.
COMESA recognizes the effects of restrictive measures that have been introduced by member states to mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Amidst these restrictions, trade has adversely been affected. Thanks to the quick action of digital technologies, it has been possible to continue operating, and this forum is a testimony to the determination that we must all carry on.
The Director General of the Export Promotion Center, CIPEX, indicated that 1,000 private sector operators representing Tunisia and other African countries took part in the digital conference.
Products of Tunisian companies are available online to 25 countries and 1,000 importers from Africa. This is an important achievement because it paves the way for exporting goods and services to other African nations.
CPEX announced that B2Match platform, which fosters business relationships, is a multifunctional platform that essentially enables the management of the various matchmaking operations in conference or B2B mode. Over 2,000 B2B meetings were held during the 3-day virtual event. During the Tunisia-Africa e-business meetings, many experts declared that the share of African trade in the global trade does not exceed 5%, with about 16% of intra-African trade. These indicators confirm that the potential for trade between African nations remains untapped. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And Algerian authorities have commenced a nationwide initiative to boost reforestation and preserve green spaces. The reforestation initiative involves planting saplings throughout Algeria's forests with the help of firefighters, the military, volunteers and civilians. Now, the drive began shortly after large fires gripped several of Algeria's forests earlier this month, burning countless trees and injuring a number of its citizens due to heavy smoke inhalation. The government is investigating the cause of these fires, with some suspecting criminal acts. Strict laws have also been imposed to combat instigation of any forest fires.
This is a humanitarian initiative against the attack on the environment. We pray to God to guide these people who burnt the forests, and God willing, we will carry out more of this initiative so that every Algerian will have 10 trees and not only 1 tree. May God bring all good things.
We are working on reforestation of what was destroyed by the fire in the last days. And we ask all people and everyone who can plant a tree in front of his or her house to do so.
We are doing this to revive our forest wealth. They burn and we plant, they destroy and we rebuild our new Algeria.
You are watching Global Business Africa. We'll be right back after this short break, but still to come. A conference on 5G and the industrial internet gets underway in Wuhan, China. And a UK airline offers pre-boarding coronavirus testing as airlines struggle to support aviation recovery.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Well, let's now recap other headlines at this hour. The World Health Organization says Gilead's remdesivir is no longer recommended for COVID-19 patients. Remdesivir is one of the two medicines currently authorized to treat coronavirus patients in more than 50 nations. But a large WHO-led trial showed it did not improve survival rates or reduce the need for ventilation. The medication was one of the drugs used to treat the U.S. president's coronavirus infection. And reports indicate that more people are fleeing the unrest in Ethiopia's northern state of Tigray. The UN predicts that around 200,000 Ethiopians could pour into Sudan. Now, aid agencies are concerned over the impact of the arrivals. There's also the fear of disease spreading amongst the crowds, with nearly half of them being children. And the United Nations peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo has started a gradual withdrawal of its 18,000-strong force in line with an agreement reached with the Congolese government in October. Now, the plan is to progressively transfer its activities to Congolese authorities after 2 decades of trying to stabilize the country that, of course, has been wrecked by violence and political instability. And this Friday has been World Children's Day. UN Children's Agency, UNICEF, has been outlining the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on children. The most serious threat, it says, is the disruption of access to critical health and social services. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. And let's get you some international news now. Chinese President Xi Jinping has addressed a gathering of Asia-Pacific leaders via video link. He was speaking at the APEC Economic Leaders meeting hosted by Malaysia. Now, the Chinese leader called for more cooperation in public health to beat the coronavirus pandemic and revive the global economy. He said COVID-19 vaccines should be a global public good and be accessible and affordable for developing countries. In a renewed call for multilateralism, he said economic cooperation should be a platform for mutually beneficial development. He also said that China will consider joining the free trade deal that grew out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It currently includes 11 countries such as Japan, Vietnam, and Canada. Meanwhile, a national conference on 5G and the industrial internet is underway in Wuhan, China. Forums are exploring integration of 5G in industry, and contracts for major projects are expected to be signed. Well, CGTN's Zhang Yibing is there and brings us more.
A major operation is underway in China to build 5G networks and integrate them into industry to promote high-quality economic growth. This conference aims to promote that integration with backing from the central government.
5G plus the industrial internet is gaining great momentum in advancing the digitalization and networking of manufacturing.
There are already more than 1,000 such construction projects as part of China's national construction plan. 700,000 base stations have been built. More than 30,000 of them are exclusively for the use of industry.
We're about 1,000 kilometers from the mine. We use 5G to remote control operations there with a very short latency.
This is a 5G smart factory for clothing. Remote control helps managers. It's labor-saving and can increase efficiency.
The application of 5G in industry is part of China's next 5-year plan in a sector which is now being drawn up. But there's a long way ahead.
The cost of 5G is relatively high at the moment, and we need to improve standards in applications for 5G and the industrial internet.
Some small and medium companies think there's a technological threshold that needs to be overcome to apply the industrial internet. We need to lower that threshold for them.
Another issue is security.
We need to consider security issues from the start and build security into the system with good designs so we don't have to keep plugging holes as we did in the past.
This is the first conference in China to focus on integrating 5G and industry for national development. Like Chinese President Xi Jinping said in his congratulatory letter to the conference, the integration of 5G with industrial internet will give new impetus to the economic growth in China and other parts of the world. And the participants hope more joint efforts can be made in the sector. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Wuhan, in Hubei province.
Now, of course, 5G is boosting efficiency in government affairs. In the city of Dandong in northeastern China's coastal province of Liaoning, paying taxes has become more convenient for residents and businesses. CGTN's San Qianyuan with more.
The city of Dandong, located on the edge of China's eastern borderline, is taking e-government affairs, namely tax services, into new territory. To the cloud with 5G technology.
95% of tax services can be done through the intelligent cloud system now. We've been upgrading and promoting the system. More taxpayers have now embraced the new mold.
For company accountants who often deal with corporate taxes 3 to 4 times a month, the increasingly popular 5G terminals can be a time saver.
We no longer need to wait in line for an hour to do the tax work over the counter. Sometimes we can get invoices while taking the children to a mall. This is very convenient.
Dandong's tax bureau has made good use of 5G's advantages to boost efficiency in e-government affairs over a 4-year period, providing high-quality services for its people.
So far, the operation has been very good. We've covered 50% of taxpayers using 5G's high speed and large bandwidth to establish a barrier-free communication with them.
Taxpayers can also choose to complete their applications or launch inquiries in a one-on-one video session with tax staff on their phones.
With 5G technology, taxpayers may no longer need to travel to a physical location to do their taxes. Instead, they can download an application and do it with a few clicks. So this could come in quite handy and be quite safe, especially with a pandemic to think about.
One of our taxpayers was stranded in Heilongjiang province earlier this year due to the outbreak. We helped him do his taxes on the application in just 5 minutes.
Although not everyone has access to a 5G network, at least for now, the platform is aiming high by experimenting with different possibilities for the foreseeable future. So when the time comes, more people should be able to enjoy the benefits by dealing with the tax issues in a modern way. Sun Tianyuan, CGTN, Dandong, Liaoning Province.
Now, for even the most experienced travelers, getting on a plane during a pandemic is bound to give you pause. One airline is now attempting to ease travelers' minds by testing each passenger for COVID-19 just prior to them boarding. CGTN's Nawid Jabrakil has more from London.
Flying from New York to London was an almost hourly service before COVID, but the route's a lot quieter these days, with both the US and UK battling a second wave of the virus. That could be set to change. On Tuesday, United Airlines Flight 14 was the first transatlantic service to offer free coronavirus tests for passengers.
We believe testing is the solution and is the way forward before, of course, the vaccine is available. But it is important to say that testing has to be rapid and obviously accurate, but it has to be accessible to the consumers.
United's hoping rapid testing before departures could offer some hope for an industry that's been battered by lockdowns and travel restrictions. Those who test positive can't board, but there are concerns about the accuracy of some rapid tests. And more importantly, UK laws mean anyone arriving from the US still has to quarantine for 14 days. On both sides of the Atlantic, policymakers are trying to find ways of reducing the amount of time foreign travellers need to self-isolate. As the two largest financial centres in the world, a lot of business between New York and London depends on the route. But more broadly, there's growing pressure from airlines all across the world to find a solution to try and restart international travel. Many are struggling to cope with losses and are growing uncertain about their ability to weather the pandemic. The latest casualty, Britain's EasyJet, swinging to its first annual loss in its 25-year history, a deficit of almost $1.7 billion. With many planes still grounded, it's a similar picture worldwide.
According to our latest figures, we're predicting around 174 million jobs are going to be lost only in our sector this year.
Like so many industries, a potential COVID vaccine is offering a glimmer of hope. EasyJet's bookings jumped by 50% following positive news around Pfizer's jab. But with a vaccine yet to be approved and widely rolled out, the headwinds for the aviation sector look likely to continue. Nawid Jabrakil, CGTN, London.
Now, Britain's book sales have been hit hard amidst the lockdown, with some bookstores now struggling to survive. Nicole Johnston reports from London.
During a time when many people are confined to their homes because of coronavirus, books are an escape, and a good one can take you anywhere. Maybe China or Japan. But in the UK, the second lockdown has forced bookshops to close again.
Obviously, for morale and so on, it's been a huge blow because we were beginning to see people returning to the high street, people returning to the bookshops.
So the only way to sell is online, or serving customers at the door. Daunt Books is one of London's most famous bookstores. But not even the release of former US President Barack Obama's new memoir this week can make up for all the lost business this year. Profits are down 60%. In other stores, it's as high as 90%.
Well, the Obama book, absolutely vital, and would in any year be an absolutely enormous event. Obviously driving sales, not just of that book, but bringing huge numbers of people into the bookshop over the next few days, picking up the book and buying the book.
The campaign to have books classified as essential items is growing. Some of the country's biggest authors, like Ali Smith and Philip Pullman, have written to Prime Minister Boris Johnson calling on him to allow bookshops to open. They say that reading is vital to people's mental health.
The other great challenge for independent stores is Amazon. It began by selling just books and has been swamping booksellers ever since.
We don't try to compete with Amazon because we can't sell books at the price that they sell books at most of the time. What we can do is we can differentiate ourselves by offering an experience.
But 2 weeks ago, a US online store that sells books for neighbourhood bookshops launched in the UK. It only started in the US in January.
A US company would not normally expand abroad so quickly, but the success in the US caught the attention of the publishing industry here in the UK and the booksellers here in the UK. And they basically asked bookshop.org, can you come here? We think we could use the same help.
As for the Booker Prize Award, not even that has survived unscathed this year.
Well, I think the sort of scenery of it has been, disturbed. So people always look forward to the Booker Prize. They had to put that back. Several prizes have been put back. And with that, the book trade's organised around it, and you lose that sort of momentum.
A year of lost momentum. That's an understatement. Nicole Johnston, CGTN, London.
And in some sports news, Spain's top soccer league announced recently that La Liga has slashed spending limits for its clubs by more than $700 million for the 2020-2021 season. Now, this was due to the financial impact of COVID-19. Rahul Patak has more from Madrid.
What we're trying to do is ensure our industry is sustainable, not just this season, but in future seasons. The words of La Liga president Javier Tebas. He was speaking following an unprecedented year for Spanish football. He said the pandemic, which has led to empty stadiums as well as less TV money, forced La Liga to implement a $712 million cut on the spending limit it imposes on teams. It meant in the off-season, Real Madrid spent nothing on new players, whilst Barcelona had to sell a whole load of theirs.
I think that football is going to change completely. I think we're not going to go back to because it's even with like huge teams that have countries behind them or millionaires, you have the financial fair play, so you cannot spend more than what you earn. But I think that in Spain, the thing about Real Madrid, I think Real Madrid is going to go back to make big business. But Barcelona, it's in a big financial crisis, and I don't know what's going to happen with Barcelona in the next 2 or 3 years.
Now, Barcelona were forced to sell one of their biggest stars, Luis Suarez, to one of their biggest rivals right here, to Atletico Madrid. But that was less to do with financial fair play and more to do with the fact that Barcelona just simply couldn't afford to pay Suarez's wages. Barcelona's financial crisis was brought about in part by a wage bill that was spiralling out of control. And while Barca's money worries are significant, that's nothing compared to clubs lower down the football pyramid. Clubs that almost entirely rely on gate receipts could find themselves going out of business thanks to the pandemic.
It's the biggest drama, and it's something that we don't talk about it. And it's the second, third division, in lower levels. And it's not only the clubs, the players, they need their salary to survive, to pay the bills. Where the financial crisis in the COVID hit it the hardest in football, the lower division.
Meanwhile, the La Liga president Tebas also criticised England's Premier League, saying their model of big spending was unsustainable in the current COVID climate. However, he also admitted that on the pitch, the new financial reality for La Liga could see them falling behind. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
Well, let's now shift focus and take a look at commodity markets. Oil prices heading for a third weekly gain as a positive COVID-19 vaccine developments offered bulls encouragement about the market's prospects. Now, Brent rose as high as $44.78 a barrel. According to traders, the vaccine news is supporting the view that world oil demand will move higher over the course of 2021. But of course, the immediate future still remains pretty green. Meanwhile, gold prices stalling today after U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin called for an end to some of the U.S. Fed's pandemic lending. That move has sparked uncertainty about stimulus programs, which of course have played a key role in reassuring financial markets. Well, we're going to take a short break now, still to come. The Kenyan startup that's leading the way in converting petrol and diesel engines to electric cars. Now, a young man in Nigeria is causing a stir with his unique creations and innovations. Based in a community outside the country's capital, Abuja, Ismaila Surajo has built various prototype machines from waste material. Here's Deji Badmus with his story.
My name is Ismaila Surajo from Rubochi, Kuje Area Council, FCT Abuja.
At just 22 and only a secondary school education, Surajo is an example of the raw talents that abound in Africa's most populous country. He's invented and created several items from heavy machine prototypes to robots. And one fascinating thing about Surajo's constructions is that he uses scraps and recyclable materials. Simple everyday items you will find at dump sites.
I've made excavator, grader, train, bulldozer, dump truck, electronic voting machine, ship, robot, network service, mass communication, truck.
Surajo started at a very young age when he was in primary 1 and with no learning experience from anywhere.
I started with carton. I was my way back from the farm. My slippers caught. I don't have money to buy slippers. And I look for carton. And I measure my foot and construct slippers. Then the next day, we are going to the farm to pack groundnuts. And I think I can't carry groundnut on my head. If I can get a pickup, it will be easy for me. And I look for a carton and construct a little pickup. And I make use of it to carry one model of groundnut from farm to house. Then when I enter senior secondary school, and I think of building a bigger one that can carry me, which is this truck. Then I start from carton to aluminium, then from aluminium to iron.
The truck he constructed solves a number of problems for his small community. And Surajo is able to make some money for himself.
In my community, it's very difficult for people to get water. Before they can get the water, it's very far away. Now they are very happy. With the help of this machine, the water is easy for them. Once they need the water, they call me through my number. And I normally take the water to them, house to house.
We normally go and bring our farm product when we harvest, and before we get bike mobility that will bring down the farm product. So we used to suffer so very seriously. But now, in fact, we thank God. So we need assistance from the government or individual assistance that we make him to produce or to manufacture more this thing.
I can make a bigger excavator, grader, dump truck. If I've been supported by the government, I can do the bigger one that can be used for the construction of the road in the country. Yes, also I can make a train, a bigger one that can be used in our communities. I need financial support, and also I want to further my education to achieve my dream.
Surajo is a talent that seeks nurturing, and at a time when the Nigerian government is driving a Made in Nigeria campaign, creators like this young man could become an important part of that push. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, the evolution of electric cars and bikes are taking center stage in Africa. OP Bus, a startup company in Nairobi, Kenya, is now converting petrol and diesel cars to electric cars. They've also come up with electric bikes now. Here's CGTN's Nick Budimba with their story.
Tesla set the global pace by making electric vehicles, and now Africa might be on the right track positioning itself in the world of electric mobility. OPBus, a startup company driven by overwhelming effects of climate change, is now making strides. At the workshop in the outskirts of Nairobi, we find the engineers here converting a tour van to a fully functional electric vehicle. They removed the internal combustion engine and put in an electric engine, a battery system, and a control system for a complete electric car.
It all starts with receiving the vehicle and inspection. So initial inspections, we check the quality of the car, what stages in its life it's gone through, and we now start the process of renovating it. So the first thing is we remove the engine, we remove the fuel and the gearbox, because these are things that we do not require for the electric conversion.
After that, they check the feasibility of the vehicle, components like the chassis, power steering, because here they are giving a vehicle a new life. To charge the vehicle, you can charge anywhere there's electricity, and the charging port replaces that of fuel.
We are pushing electric mobility to make sure that it's affordable for everyone, right? So at this point, we're making sure that we're focusing on the areas where it makes most economic sense. The main thing that we do is, instead of importing vehicles to this region, we make sure that we build a local capacity for both assembly, design, manufacturing, and support and service of these vehicles. If we want this area of the world to have a lot of electric vehicles in 2030, we need to start now. There's no time to waste.
But just in the next go down, something caught our eyes. They're also manufacturing electric motorcycles, one of its kind. It looks sleek and compact, the parts well placed and connected.
So we have the first designed and manufactured electric motorcycle in Africa, right here. So a boda rider or a motorcycle rider can actually cut their fuel expenditure and service expenditure in half with having an electric motorcycle. They can double their income from this.
I gave it a try. Its picking power, stability and speed is out of this world. 100% electric. The motorbike has no gear, has no clutch. It's just about acceleration as you move on. Also, the lithium-ion batteries are rechargeable. You can actually carry a backup battery, and also something special is that you can charge the battery in the comfort of your home.
When you come to electricity, when we did the calculations on electric consumption and versus the fuel consumption, we saw that there is 50% reduction. So it's a plus for them.
The electric mobility comes with lots of benefits. Cheaper to maintain, zero emissions, fast, easy home charging, a quieter, more enjoyable driving experience, and the lifespan of the whole technology may go up to 30 years. The plan now for Opibus is to expand and touch base with the transport sector in Africa, step by step, to decrease oil dependency and encourage clean, silent electric energy in the continent. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, before we leave you, let's take a look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand wavering between flat and negative territory ahead of expected credit rating reviews in the country. In Nigeria, the naira hit another record low today despite attempts to increase the dollar supply. Now, dollar demand by manufacturers and traders is growing faster than expected. As a result, the naira depreciated against the dollar, closing at 480 naira per dollar at the parallel market. At the official NAFEX window, it appreciated against the dollar to close at 386 naira per dollar. And that is it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for